Well, in general, I will say that the history of Bitcoin has been a flock of these black swans. Have been a lot of these events, a lot of the history. Like think about Mongox, think about FTX, think about China banning Bitcoin, think about there have been a lot of events. One event that I'm using all the time as a reference is this dip here. Do you know what that dip is? You see how the price dips very quickly there? That is COVID. So during COVID, you see the price corrected very strongly. And you see how, where did it go? It went to that support line, right? Because there is one of the things that people, I don't know if everybody's aware, but we found not just the general trend that goes through the middle of the action of Bitcoin, but actually if you go 60% below that, there is this green line that is what we call the support Bitcoin power law. And it looks like Bitcoin reaches that line. And there are other charts that I can show you that look even better because this one, like I say, it's kind of, uh, you have to push it to get this log behavior on trading view. But let me show you another chart. I have many indicators. We develop all these indicators to give different type of information about the power law. Okay, so in this case, I'm taking only the log. The calculations are all done like if I was dealing with the log of time and the log of price, but the more natural way of showing things in trading view is actually just using the log of price, right? In that case, the power law looks curved, looks a curve like that. It's an artifact of taking the log because really the linear version, if people wanted to have an intuition of how the power law looks like, it looks like this. It's actually like a parabola, but it's much faster parabola, right? Parabola means x squared. We are talking about x to the 6. So it's much faster, but it looks like curve up, right? This is how the power law looks like. Now, if I take the log, it will look curve like this, but it's never reaching a ceiling. They always go up because it does like this because in a graph like this, if you have an exponential, it will look like a straight line. So anything that is not an exponential, that is slower than an exponential, it looks curved. And this is what Bitcoin is. It's not an exponential, it's a power law, right? So if we zoom in that region where that event happened, that is, and this is why I'm using COVID. COVID was a crazy black swan event for the market. Absolutely was, right? There was an interruption in the supply chain. People stayed at home. Represented a disruption, and the market reacted. But notice what happened? It arrived to that support line, and that support line. You see how the support line catches all the different bottoms, right? It catches all the bottoms that we had historically, and there is a reason. It's not a coincidence because differently from other methods, right? With support, talk about support, resistance, all these TA methods. This is science. And the science behind this is actually basically physics, the physics of producing Bitcoin. Bitcoin, one of the things that many people forget, differently from many currencies or assets, uh, gold, for example, has that, but it's even gold takes money to be produced, right? You have to extract it, you have to pay people to, and nowadays is more and more difficult because a lot of mines are exhausted. There are people finding gold at the bottom of the sea, etc. It's very expensive to extract gold. It takes energy, it takes time, it takes money. With Bitcoin, it's even more precise because you have to use computational power that costs money, and there is the difficulty adjustment. That is the other thing that many people don't realize, that it was programmed where you cannot game the system. If you are trying to get more Bitcoin, then the system is adjusting itself, right? But with because there is this mechanism, many Bitcoiners almost seem to ignore that. I don't hear a lot of people talking about a component. It's almost like you're dealing with something that is coded, so a lot of regularities can be explained by that. This regularity of the bottom, it's a consequence of that. Actually, we have done some work, because you mentioned I did a lot of work. I didn't just draw a line and stop there. I'm working 12 hours a day, every single day, on trying to understand Bitcoin, and I have done this for 12 years. I usually write articles about that, some people read or make YouTube videos, etc. But some people went through the rabbit hole and studied all these things. Other people think they understand the power law, but they have a very superficial understanding. If you go deep, that is one of the things that is really relevant with this support line. We showed several times. We need to study it even more. We don't have a definitive proof, but we have a lot of evidence all lined up that shows that the hash rate, if you make a model of Bitcoin where you use hash rate, you get exactly this support level. And that means that is the cost of producing Bitcoin. And so notice what happened during COVID. We arrived there and the market was going crazy, and then it bounced back. It bounced back because, first of all, everybody was exhausted, right? By that time, there was nothing to sell. All the people who wanted to sell sold, right? All the people got scared. And the miners also refused to sell. This is what happened every time we reach the bottom. They reach the point that they don't have necessarily aware of the chart. They are not looking at the chart. Maybe now some do, because they did talk a lot with different mining companies, etc. They are very interested in this approach. But they know because it's part, if you are a bad mining company, you will get wiped out anyway. You will stop functioning. And the good ones that know, they do calculate how much it costs to produce Bitcoin. And if the price of Bitcoin is smaller than that, they stop selling. And that creates some kind of natural flow for Bitcoin. And the price bounced back. So this is one of the events. So there are things like this where almost like a test, right? This was a stress test for the theory that says there is something very powerful in this approach, in this framework, and is the correct way of understanding Bitcoin. That is a scaling system that has these internal feedback loops, because this is how you get power laws. It's all about this understanding that Bitcoin is a network. And so networks are very resistant. So if you read about book Scale, is one of the things that is discussed, that how networks that are associated with power law is almost like, one-to-one, right? Networks show power law properties. Networks are very resistant, very resilient to black swan events. They can change. You can change them, you can modify them, and they react. But then they try to go back. Think about, for example, the human body. The human body, it's a network, because imagine all the different parts of our body, our cells, right? They communicate with each other. A network is basically a system where there are the individual components that we call nodes. In this case, for the human body, it's the cells, right? There are all the different cells that do their own thing. There are their own individual entities. But then they work and communicate with other similar entities. And they have channels of communication that are called the links, right? It can be through the blood system. It can be through the nervous system. It can be, there are many different pathways where the cell communicate with each other, right? And one of the characteristics, any doctor will tell you, one of the most fundamental characteristics of a living being, of a biological system, is that it likes homeostasis. And homeostasis means basically balance. It means, that the system wants to go back to equilibrium, right? So if I run and my heart starts to pump a lot, then when I rest, when I stop and rest, the heartbeat goes back to balance, right? There is all these values in terms of metabolism, in terms of physiology, that are reference values. And if you push the system because of a illness, because of stress or whatever, the system wants to go back to equilibrium. It doesn't matter if you push it or if you are too low of these values. You also want to go back, right? So this is typical of network. And so, yes, of course, there are things that worry me, and we can mention some of these things. But in general, I have also this intuition, because to me, the power law, it's a guidance. I would like people to start to use the power law as a guidance, as a framework to think about Bitcoin. You should think, when there are difficult events, say, listen, it's a network. It will go back to equilibrium, right? And it's not something that people should take as a religion, because in science there is never such attitude. It's more like a framework. It's more a way of putting Bitcoin in a context and trying to guide you in how to think about every event. So yes, in one end, sure, I can imagine things like, they have to be really drastic. Like, for example, if there is a nuclear war, of course, a situation like that, we will not even have civilization of something like that. But in general, unless there is like a dramatic crisis, I think the power law will stay, because if it worked for 15 years, it means there is some kind of a process, right? We need to identify, we need to understand it, because why people want to join the network? What is going on? What are the forces that drive people to join this network? Or not just individual people, but also, different institutions, right? Small institution, large institution. Now we're talking even about governments and states, right? What drives everybody to want to join this network in such a way that it grows? Because that is the other result, right? We were able to show that the growth in time has to do with the growth in adoption. Because if you look at things like, for example, addresses, that is a good proxy for adoption, is also a power law. And in fact, it's a power law that is related. The reason why we have this growth in time is because addresses also grow as a power law. And the relationship between price and addresses is a power law. Basically, the power law in time is the result of other two power laws. And hash rate is also a power law. There are power laws all over the place in Bitcoin. So why adoption is growing as a power law? Well, probably because the nature of what Bitcoin is, in terms of how it's affecting people ideas about value, like you mentioned before, because it's, in the end, the Bitcoin is a story about value, how we value things, right? It's something that people, institution, maybe even nations soon react in this, with this understanding, right? So it's kind of a, for example, there are other phenomena that behave in a very regular fashion. Like, for example, you are aware of Moore's law, right? Moore's law tell us how much computational power we can put in a chip, right? And it seems to double every 2 years. Why there is such a regularity? And you will think it's something to do with how technology evolves, etc. But why technology should evolve in this very regular fashion, where you actually come up with a law, right? This law, people think law means they cannot be broken, and say they are statistical law, right? They work. It's in science, law means a pattern, right? So there are these regular patterns. Moore's law have been working for more than 50 years, and there are other patterns like that. People studied. One of my inspiration in looking for these regularities in Bitcoin is a thinker, and he's like an engineer. His name is Ray Kurzweil. He's very interested in describing the path of technological developments. He even went all the way. He has chart showing that if you look at how technologies have evolved over time, all the way to the invention of a wheel. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of years. It follows a very precise pattern, that you can actually draw on a chart. And so there is something about human nature where when we work together, like, for example, in cities, why cities follow power law. The GDP of a city is a power law in terms of the size of a city. The number of libraries, the number of gas stations, the number of patents that are produced in a city. They follow power law, right? There's something about when humans work together and we build something that is significant, that is valuable to us, and also nature of other phenomena, right? We mentioned different growth phenomena like tooth and thorns and horns and shells. This is a preferred pattern, right? It's something that holds on over a long period of time. that is stable, etc. So it's a mystery because, human beings, you will think a human, one thing is seeing it in nature, and then you say, okay, maybe there is some physiological things that I need to understand, it express itself, etc. With human beings, you always think that we do whatever we want, right? We are free agents. But yes, maybe that is true at the individual level, but as when we work together, there is a coordination of behavior that is shown over time to be basically these power laws when we do certain particular things. And so there is this deep intuition from my side where I think this pattern will continue.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.